Part 7. Bill asked hesitantly, "Do you want me to get her some Tylenol or something?" "Better not," he said. "We don't know what's wrong with her, how bad she might be hurt." His eyes shifted to the show window, not wanting to see what was out there, hoping not to, and seeing it anyway. Avid faces lined up all the way down to the place where the beer cooler cut off the view. Some of them were cupping their hands to the sides of their faces to cut the glare. "What should we do, you guys?" Sue asked. She was looking at the goggles and picking nervously at the hem of the red apple dust employees had to wear. "If the company finds out that I lock my door during my business hours, I'm apt to lose my job." Helen tugged at his hand. "Please, Ralph," she repeated, only it came out, "Please, Ralph. Please, Raph," through her swollen lips. "Don't call anybody." Ralph looked at her uncertainly. He had seen a lot of women wearing a lot of bruises over the course of his life, and a couple, although not many in all honesty, who had been beaten much more severely than Helen. And Helen had always seemed to scrim, though. His mind and morals had been formed at a time when people believed that what went on between a husband and wife behind the closed doors of their marriage was their business, and that included the man who beat with his fists and the woman who cut with her tongue. You couldn't make people behave, meddling into their affairs even with the best of intentions. All too often, friends turned friends into enemies. But then he thought of the way she had been carrying Natalie as she staggered across the parking lot, held casually on one hip like a textbook. If she had dropped the baby in the lot or crossing Harris Avenue, she probably wouldn't have known it. Ralph guessed that it was nothing but instinct that caused Helen to take the baby in the first place. She hadn't wanted to leave Nat in the care of the man who had beaten her so badly she could see only out of one eye and talk in mushy, rounded syllables. He thought of something else as well, something that had to do with the days following Carolyn's death earlier in the year. He had been surprised at the depth of his grief. It had been an unexpected death, after all. He had believed he had taken care of most of his grieving while Carolyn was still alive, and it rendered him awkward and ineffective about the final arrangements which would needed to be made. He had managed the call to the Brookings Smith funeral home, but it was Helen who had gotten the obit from the Daily News and helped him to fill it out. Helen, who had gone with him to pick out a coffin. McGovern, who hated death and the trappings which surrounded it, had made himself scarce. And Helen, who had helped him choose a floral centerpiece, the one which said "Beloved Wife." And it had been Helen, of course, who had orchestrated the little party afterward, providing sandwiches from Frank's Catering and soft drinks and beer from the Red Apple. These were things Helen had done for him when he could not do them for himself. Did he not have an obligation to repay her kindness, even if Helen might not see it as kindness right now? "Bill?" he asked. "What do you think?" Bill looked from Ralph to Helen sitting in the red plastic chair with her battered face lowered, then back to Ralph again. He produced a handkerchief and wiped his lips nervously. "I don't know. I like Helen a lot, and I want to do the right thing. You know I do. But something like this, who knows what the right thing is?" Ralph suddenly remembered what Carolyn used to say whenever he started moaning and bitching about some chore he didn't want to do, some errand he didn't want to run, or some duty call he didn't want to make. "It's a long walk back to Eden, sweetheart, so don't sweat the small stuff." He reached for the phone again, but this time, when Helen reached for his wrist, he pushed it away. "You have reached the Derry Police Department," a recorded voice told him. "Push 1 for emergency services, push 2 for police services, push 3 for information." Ralph, who suddenly understood he needed all 3, hesitated for a second, then pushed 2. The telephone buzzed and a woman's voice said, "This is Police 911. How may I help you?" He took a deep breath and said, "This is Ralph Roberts. I'm at the Red Apple store on Harris Avenue with my neighbor from up the street. Her name is Helen Dietmar. She's beaten up pretty badly." He put his hand gently on the side of Helen's face, and she pressed her forehead against his side. She could feel the heat of her skin through his shirt. "Please come as fast as you can." He hung up the telephone, then squatted down next to Helen. Natalie saw him, crowed with delight, and reached out to give his nose a friendly honk. Ralph smiled, kissed her tiny palm, then looked into Helen's face. "I'm sorry, Helen," he said, "but I had to. I couldn't not do it. Do you understand? I couldn't not do it." "I don't understand anything," she said. Her nose had stopped bleeding, but when she reached up to swipe at it, she winced back from the touch of her own fingers. "Helen, why did he do it? Why would Ed beat you up like this?" He found himself remembering the other bruises, a pattern of them, perhaps. If there had been a pattern, he missed it until now. because of Carolyn's death and because of the insomnia which had come afterward. In any case, he did not believe this was the first time Ed put his hands on his wife. Today might have been a drastic escalation, but it hadn't been the first time. He could grasp that idea in a minute's logic, but he still discovered he couldn't still see Ed doing it. He could see Ed's quick grin, his lively eyes, the way his hands moved restlessly when he talked, but he couldn't see Ed using those hands to beat the fuck out of his wife, no matter how hard he tried. Then, a memory resurfaced. A memory of Ed walking stiff-legged toward the man who had been driving the blue pickup. It had been a Ford Ranger, hadn't it? Then, flicking the flat of his hand across the heavy-set man's jowls, remembering that was like opening the door of Fibber McGee's closet in that old radio show. Only what came falling out wasn't an avalanche of old stored junk, but a series of vivid images from that day last July. The thunderheads building over the airport, Ed's arm popping out of the Datsun's window, waving it up and down as if he could make the gate slide open faster that way. The scarf with the Chinese symbols on it. Hey, Susan Day, how many kids did you kill today? Ralph thought. Only it was Ed's voice heard, and he pretty well knew what Helen was going to say before she even opened her mouth. So stupid, she said dully. He hit me because I signed a petition. That's all it was. They're circulating all over town. Someone pushed into my face when I was going to the supermarket day before yesterday. He said something about a benefit for woman care, and that seemed all right. Besides, the baby was fussing, so I just signed it, Ralph said softly. She nodded and began to cry again. What petition? Bill asked. To bring Susan Day to Derry, Ralph told him. She's a feminine. I know who Susan Day is, Bill said irritably. Anyway, a bunch of people are trying to get her here to speak on behalf of woman care. When Ed came home today, he was in a great mood, Helen said through her tears. He almost always is on Thursday because it's his half day. He was talking about how he was going to spend the afternoon pretending to read a book and actually just watching the sprinkler go around. You know how he is. Yes, Ralph said, remembering how Ed had plunged his arm into one of the heavy-set man's barrels and the crafty grin. I know a trick worth two of that. On his face. Yes, I know how he is. I sent him out to get some baby food. His voice was rising, becoming fretful and frightened. I didn't know he'd be upset. I'd all but forgotten about signing the damn thing, to tell the truth. And I still don't know how exactly why he was so upset, but when he came back, she hugged Natalie to her, trembling. Shh, Ellen, take it easy. Everything's okay. No, it's not! She looked up at him, tears streaming from one eye and seeping out from beneath the swelled lid of the other. It's not! Why didn't he stop this time? And what's going to happen to me and the baby? Where will we go? I don't have any money except for what's in the joint checking account. I don't have a job! Oh, Ralph, why did you call the police? You shouldn't have done that! And she hit his forearm with a strengthless little fist. You're going to get through this just fine, he said. You got a lot of friends in the neighborhood. But he barely heard what he was saying, and he hadn't felt her small punch at all. Anger was thudding away in his chest and in his temples like a second heartbeat. Not why didn't he stop. That wasn't what she had said. What she had said was, why didn't he stop this time? This time. Helen, where's Ed now? Oh my gosh, she said dully. Ralph patted her on the shoulder and turned and started for the door. Ralph? Bill asked. He sounded alarmed. Where are you going? Lock the door after me, Ralph told Sue. Geez, I don't know if I can do that. She looked doubtfully at the line of gawkers peering in through the dirty window. There were more of them now. You can, he said, then cocked his head, catching the first faint whirl of an approaching siren. Hear that? Yes, but the cops will tell you what to do, and your boss won't be mad at you either. I'll probably give you a medal for handling everything just right. If he does, I'll split it with you, she said, then glanced at Helen again. A little color had come back into Sue's cheeks, but not much. Jeepers, Ralph, look at her. Did he really beat her up because she signed some stupid paper in the S&S? I guess so, Ralph said. The conversation made perfect sense to him, but it was coming in long distance. His rage was closer, had its hard arms locked around his neck. It seemed. He wished he were 40 again, even 50, so he could give Ed a taste of his own medicine. He had an idea he might try doing that anyway. He was turning the thumb bolt of the door when McGovern grabbed his shoulder. What do you think you're doing, going to see Ed? Are you kidding? I'll take you apart if you get in his face. Didn't you see what he did to her? You bet I did, Ralph replied. The words weren't quite a snarl, but close enough to make Bill drop his hand. You're 70 fucking years old, Ralph, in case you forgot. And Helen needs a friend right now, not some busted-up antique she could visit because his hospital room is 3 doors down from hers. Bill was right, of course. Bet that only made Ralph angrier. He supposed the insomnia was at work at this too, soaking his anger and blurring his judgment, but that made no difference. In a way, the anger was a relief. It was better, certainly, than drifting through a world where everything had turned shades of dark gray. If he beats me up bad enough, they'll give me some Demerol and I can get a decent night's sleep, he said. Now leave me alone, Bill. He crossed the Red Apple parking lot at a brisk walk. A police car was approaching with its blue grill flashers pulsing. Questions. What happened? Is she okay? Were thrown at him, but Ralph ignored them. He paused on the sidewalk waiting for the police car to swing into the parking lot, then crossed Harris Avenue at that same brisk walk, with McGovern trailing anxiously at him at a prudent distance.